After watching the latest episode of The Last of Us, there's truly only one man capable of capturing my emotions.
To me, this situation is a blood-soaked, nightmarish hellscape. I'm not interested in caring about people.
There's a sign at Ramsey Park that says, "Do not drink the sprinkler water," so I made sun tea with it, and now I have an infection.
Yes, I can't believe they got Ron Swanson to play Bill in this absolutely heart-wrenching episode, which had me questioning,
am I gay?
In this video, we'll be taking a deep dive into Episode 3, its connection to the game, lore, Easter eggs, and a whole lot more. And with that, let's get into it, but before you do, be sure to like and subscribe. I may not always cover the shows you watch, but when I do...
it's fantastic!
We open 10 miles west of Boston, likely a day after Tess had one of the creepiest makeout sessions. She sacrificed herself so that Joel and Ellie could escape the infected at the Capitol building. It's only been about 2 days since Joel fractured his hand while turning this Fedra agent's face into a pile of goo. He dips his hand in the water to retrieve stones which he piles on top of one another to create this cairn. Cairns, or stone stacking, has held multiple meanings throughout history, commonly used as trail markers or burial mounds, and here I think it's the latter. Tess was Joel's rock. She grounded him, and this small act is a way of remembering her. This shot here is one of my favorites in the episode as it displays 3 symbols of Joel's past trauma. 1, the bloody hand, the killing of the Fedra agent. 2, the cairn, Tess's death. And 3, Sarah's watch, a constant reminder of his daughter's death. This is all interspersed with the director's decision to frame Joel in these forest POV shots, suggesting that even during these tranquil moments, someone could always be watching. It seems Joel and Ellie have spent the night in the woods. Joel even gave Ellie his jacket for warmth. In the game, Ellie says she's never even walked through the woods before.
You mean the woods?
Yeah. Never walked in the woods. It's kind of cool.
But the big elephant in the forest is Tess's death. If you remember last episode, he simply left Ellie and walked away after she died. He didn't say a word. Joel has learned to bottle his emotions. This is why he doesn't want to talk to Ellie about his past, just like he skirted her questions in episode 2, nor why he doesn't bring up Tess's death. The same is true in the game.
Here's how this thing's gonna play out. You don't bring up Tess. Ever. Matter of fact, we just keep our histories to ourselves.
This is almost identical to the 3 rules Joel gives Ellie near the end of the episode.
Rule 1, you don't bring up Tess. Ever. Matter of fact, we can just keep our histories to ourselves.
Rule 2, don't tell anyone about your condition. And Rule 3, do what he says when he says it.
Daddy, chill.
What the hell is even that?
Fun fact, in the game version, this conversation happens before they reach Bill, while in the show it happens right after they leave his place. But Ellie isn't going to take this shit from Joel, saying,
"So don't blame me for something that isn't my fault."
it was Joel's choice to take on this mission. He and Tess knew the risks. At the end of episode 2, Tess tasked Joel to take Ellie to Bill and Frank's in the hopes they'll take her in. In the game version, she tells him to take her to Tommy. Bill and Frank were the B&F markings on Joel's smuggler code, which Ellie easily deciphered in episode 1. Later in the episode, we'll actually see that it was Frank who suggested to Tess that they use codes over the radio. Ellie asks if Bill and Frank are nice, to which Joel says,
Frank is.
As we'll soon meet Bill, we'll know exactly why Joel answered this way. Ellie also takes notice of Joel's gun. In episode 2, she wanted one, but was relegated to only throwing chicken sandwiches.
Can I have a gun?
Absolutely not.
Okay, Jesus, fine. I'll just throw a sandwich at them.
In the game, she wants a gun too.
What? I need a gun.
No, you don't.
It's even hinted at in the show that this smaller gun here might have once belonged to Bill. As we'll later find out, Frank sold one of Bill's smaller guns to Tess and Joel in exchange for strawberry seeds. At Cumberland Farms, an abandoned gas station where Joel left a stash of supplies several years prior, Ellie finds an old arcade version of Mortal Kombat 2, stating she had a friend who knew everything about it. This is a reference to Riley, who was briefly mentioned in episode 1 by Marlene.
Terrorist? Was Riley a terrorist?
We haven't yet seen her in the show, but in the season ahead trailer we get a brief glimpse of her on this carousel, a nod to the events of The Last of Us DLC titled Left Behind. In the game, they stumble across an arcade, and it's not Mortal Kombat 2, but a game called The Turning, and also makes an appearance at the pizza and sub restaurant in Lincoln in The Last of Us Part 1.
I had a friend that knew everything about this game.
Unfortunately, no cool Melina kills.
Melina wins.
Bonus points if you caught the lifesaver stand in the background, a fun metaphor for Joel and Ellie being each other's lifesaver. And extra points if you caught the safe code on the wall. In the game, safe codes are littered all over the place, which lead to valuable safes. While Joel tries to find the supplies he stashed years ago, Ellie has the insanely smart idea to venture into the creepy hidden basement. And I'm not sure what's scarier for the men out there in this scene, the crushed infected or a box of Tampax Pearl. I also love the inclusion of lockers in the background of this set. You know I'd be there checking all these for extra supplies. Ellie is surprisingly curious around this infected, even using her switchblade, the one passed down to her by her mother, to cut into its skin. The layers underneath are reminiscent of those conducted on the woman in Jakarta 20 years ago. The tissue definitely doesn't look normal. She stabs the infected, killing it, and doesn't even tell Joel. Back up top, and to her surprise, Joel leaves his rifle, claiming that carrying it with so little ammo essentially makes it useless. As they continue their journey, they come across a downed plane. In episode 1, we saw just how dangerous it could be flying as soon as the infection spread, and I thought flying Delta was bad. Ellie thinks it's so cool that Joel once flew in one of these things, and it really puts into perspective all the things we take for granted, even things as simple as a hot shower or strawberries. For her entire life, Ellie has grown up in a Fedra orphanage, thus her education conveniently left out how the government failed to prevent the pandemic in the first place. This is the writers taking a jab at our own government's failure to respond to COVID-19, with Ellie even asking if the virus started by a monkey, much like the theory out there that COVID started with infected bats. The most common theory is that this fungal infection spread via tainted flour, which quickly spread around the world. Joel even makes reference to pancake mix, what Sarah was going to make her dad on his birthday. Talk about dodging a bullet. On their way, Joel is unable to steer Ellie away from a series of unmarked graves. These are the bones of innocent families taken from the nearby town of Lincoln and shot to death. When there was no more room in the quarantine zones, these civilians were killed because dead people don't get infected. The game does not make mention of these roundups, rather stating,
See, some places got a heads up before the infection showed up. Most didn't.
There's this great transition of the clothing of a mother and child as we flash back 20 years to September 30th, 2003, roughly 4 days after the events we saw in Austin, Texas in episode 1. It's a bit ironic that we see the swaying of an American flag as these people lose their freedoms. As we'll see in town, Lincoln is under a mandatory evacuation where everyone must be shipped off. Similar signs can be seen in the game. It's also ironic that the town is named after a president who espoused freedom, yet everyone here is being shipped away against their will. Bill here has a hidden basement within a basement where he keeps a close watch of his property via security cameras.
My idea of a perfect government is one guy who sits in a small room at a desk, and the only thing he's allowed to decide is who to nuke.
He's a paranoid conspiracy theory prepper, or as he likes to call himself, a survivalist. It's funny that people who do this nowadays are considered a bit weird, but Ellie refers to Bill as a genius. The basement is Bill's armory, where he has a stash of weapons and supplies, including a workbench where we all know you can upgrade your weapons. Bill comes out wearing a gas mask, which he also wears the first time we see him in the game. I also love how his home has this sign that says, "Come in the evening," or "Come in the morning," "Come unexpected," or "Come without warning," which is just the complete opposite of who Bill is as a character. Unlike the town of Lincoln in the game, which is more densely populated, the show's Lincoln is more akin to a quaint rural suburb. Bill wastes no time stocking up on gasoline, collecting supplies, and of course gathering the most important thing, booze. He also has a knack for anything technical, being able to connect the gas pipeline to his place and operating this large generator. Of course, no town can be safe without the appropriate electrified fence, trap pits, and who can forget, flamethrowers. In fact, his nightly entertainment is watching as these traps kill an infected. He even says,
It doesn't get old.
as if this is a regular occurrence for him. We see Joel encounter several of Bill's traps in the game, and if you're curious what Bill's fence looks like in the game, here it is. As Bill finishes his setup, Cream's 1968 song White Room plays, and if we remember the smuggler's code found in Joel's apartment, a 60s song means there's nothing. And Bill does have nothing, or should I say no one. He's all alone, which mimic the song's sad lyrics, "I'll wait in this place where the sun never shines." This is all to change 4 years later with the introduction of Frank. In Bill's bunker we get a quick shot of a "Don't Tread on Me" flag, also known as the Gadsden flag, often used as a symbol of distrust distrust or defiance against authority and the government. When his alarm alerts him to one of his traps going off, we meet Frank, a man who is only seen dead in the game, and what's about to transpire between these two varies wildly from game to show. Frank was on his way to the Boston quarantine zone after the Baltimore QZ was completely destroyed. He started with 10 people, but now he's the only one left. Of course, Bill is distrustful. He has no idea who this guy is, and if he lets him go, he could tell others.
Then every bum you talk to about it is gonna show up here looking for a free lunch. And this is not an Arby's.
I'm so hungry I could eat at Arby's.
In the game, we find a body of a dead smuggler who has a note that says, your contact is a dude named Frank and that he wants into the Boston QZ. This dead guy here was waiting for Frank, but Frank never showed up. I'll get into why that is in the game version in a bit. But something inside Bill compels him to take Frank in, and after a quick check to make sure he's not infected, using the same type of scanner Pedro uses no less, he's treated to a hot shower and warm meal. We also get our first clue that Bill may be gay. He's a bit awkward, and this awkwardness may stem from his repressed sexuality. As he'll later tell Frank, he's never been with a man. The game simply refers to Bill and Frank as partners, but as we'll soon see, their relationship pans out quite differently in the show version. Check out Bill's house. It's filled with dust and antiques, drab colors, and old photos. It's of a world that used to be. Compare this to the house we see near the end of the episode with bright flowers, colors, paintings, and warmth. Frank has brought not only this change to Bill's home, but to Bill himself. Bill has prepared Rabbit, and every time I hear Rabbit with The Last of Us, I always think of...
That's the cutest thing I've ever seen in my entire life.
I got the sense here that Frank is kind of testing the waters here with Bill's sexuality, stating that he does indeed look like a man who knows what wine to pair with Rabbit.
I'm getting an extremely gay vibe.
Later, when Bill plays Linda Ronstadt's Long Time, coincidentally the name of this episode, he asks him who the girl in the song is he's talking about. There is no girl, because Bill is gay. They share a kiss, and Frank has to remind Bill that he hasn't even told him what his name is. Now, you may have also wondered if there's any significance to Bill's tattoos. Those are actually actor Nick Offerman's real tattoos, so I think it's a safe bet to say no. Now, Frank wants to say a few more days, and those few days turn into 3 years as we fast forward to 2010. Bill and Frank are in the midst of a fight where stubborn Bill doesn't want Frank to use up their supplies to spruce up their surroundings. It's his street too, let him love it the way he wants to.
This is my street too, just let me love it the way I want to.
This is the same line he says near the end of the episode.
Then love me the way I want you to.
Part of sprucing up this town is to make it welcoming to friends, something Bill is extremely against. But it's Frank who pushes Bill out of his shell. He's even been secretly chatting with someone over the radio who will later find out is Tess. Yes, anything is possible in flashbacks as we get to see Anna Torv back again as Tess. In the game, Bill asks why Tess isn't with him, but Joel doesn't tell him that she's dead. We also get these little fun bits of information, like this paper written by Bill or Frank to collect more pills, and it mentions of a meetup with Tess. So it's clear there's this smuggler connection between these two parties. Over a quaint lunch where Joel has a gun constantly pointed at him, Tess, Frank, Bill, and Joel discuss the possibility of working together. Bill and Frank have supplies Joel and Tess need, and vice versa. Bill is still against this, saying that they're completely self-sufficient, but that isn't true. Joel notes that his fence will need to be replaced in the next year, and he could get Bill some aluminum spools that could last them a lifetime. Not to mention the QZ has access to books, medicine, and machine parts. This medicine will actually come into play later on. According to the show's timeline, Tess and Joel are in Boston and working together by 2010. Their relationship status is also called into question when Joel can't seem to find the right words when referring to him and Tess. But as we'll see in the letter near the end of the episode, it's clear Bill and Frank knew what they were, or should I say, could be. In my episode 2 breakdown, I theorized from this line,
I never ask you for anything not to feel the way I felt.
That Tess wanted more from Joel, but because he was so closed off, he could never commit to anyone. In the Last of Us podcast, we learned that they even wrote a completely different intro for episode 2 in which we see what happened to Tess's family.
Tess had a kid. She had a husband and she had a son. They were infected. She killed her husband, but she could not kill the son.
Tess and Joel's relationship is also brought up by Bill in the game, where he says,
Sounds like Might be trouble in paradise.
As they leave Lincoln, it looks to me like Frank gives Tess a lavender top and some jeans. I wonder if it's the same shirt we'll see her wear in episodes 1 and 2. Joel also gives Bill a word of warning. Fedra and infected aren't what he should be worried about. It's these roaming bands of raiders who will come at night and make quick work of his fence and protections. Perhaps Joel doesn't know the full extent of Bill's defenses, as we'll later see raiders killed by flamethrowers and the fence's electricity. 3 years later, in 2013, Bill struggles to keep up with Frank.
I got something to show you.
You mean a penis?
Not that.
He's surprised him with strawberries, yet another example of something so simple we take for granted nowadays. Bill tells him that he was never afraid until he showed up. That's because Bill now has something afraid of losing. That night, a band of raiders descend on the town. Frank searches for Bill and takes out a pistol from the dresser, the same pistol Ellie will later find and keep hidden from Joel. Bill is shot in the melee and Frank rushes him back to take care of his wound. Bill thinks he's a goner and tells Frank to call Joel. Even Bill sees Joel as this protector-type character. Fortunately, Bill survives, and the defense was strong enough to ward off the raiders. Fast forward 10 years to 2023, the same year the main events of the show take place. Frank needs a wheelchair to get around and is taken to painting. We'll see one which looks like a bowl of strawberries and lots of paintings of carrots, which were the first crops Bill grew. This painting looks like the first half was painted when Frank still had his full motor function, while the other half looks as though he attempted painting it when he lost it. Unfortunately, this is one motor Bill can't fix. It's never explained in the show what illness Frank has, just that it was incurable even before the pandemic hit, so my best guess here is some form of cancer. We'll see him here in this yellow shirt, yellow just like in episode 2, often used to convey sickness. Life for Frank is tough. He can only consume liquids and has to be helped everywhere he goes. So Frank asks Bill for one last good day.
Just give me one more good day.
It's a heart-wrenching sequence as we see the two enjoy their last day and perform their own wedding. Bill even makes him rabbit paired with the same wine they had the first day they met. The plan was to have Frank drink wine mixed with a lethal dose of medication, but unbeknownst to him, Bill has done the same with his. His entire life, Bill has had no purpose, but as he later tells Frank,
"And you were my purpose."
Losing the one thing that has kept his life worth living was too much for Bill, so he makes the choice to join him. With only a few minutes before the pills kick in, Bill wheels Frank into the room at the end of the hall and locks the door. We'll see them slowly shift out of focus as their lives cut to black, just like it does in the show. We fast forward what is likely a few weeks after Bill and Frank's death. We know this from the rotting food and the fact that Bill's radio has defaulted to an 80s playlist, which is only supposed to happen if Bill hasn't reset the countdown, which he's supposed to do every few weeks. We also know 80s music equals trouble. We heard this chime on Joel's radio at the end of episode 1. Here we can see the Lincoln town sign and compare it to the one from the game. Joel knows the code to the front gate, likely because he'd been working with Bill and Frank for the past 13 years. The first sign that something is out of the ordinary are the dead flowers outside the home, and inside we can see these candles have burned to the bottom. It's not too long after Ellie finds the letter addressed to whomever, but probably Joel, and the crushed pill bag that they put 2 and 2 together. I found Bill's note to be a message of hope for Joel. Like Joel, Bill hated the world, but Bill found a person worth saving. He found his purpose in protecting them. If Joel can find that person, perhaps he too can find the peace and happiness that makes life worth living. Bill alludes that this person is Tess for Joel, and it's a bit tough to make out, but we can see the words, "and she decide you've," recommend pairing, and the name of a wine. I got the feeling here that Bill had kind of set aside some wine if Tess and Joel would become a thing, which is even more tragic considering what happened to her last episode. Joel crumples up the letter similar to how Bill crumpled up Frank's letter in the game, and for the first time since losing his daughter, I got the feeling that maybe, just maybe, Joel might show some emotion, but he once again bottles it up. Bill has bequeathed to Joel his truck, which is the same blue Chevy found in the game. Along with that, any supplies he wants. But with Bill and Frank gone, what does Joel do with Ellie? In the game, the whole purpose of visiting Bill is not to dump Ellie off to him, but to get a car. In the game version, Bill owes Joel big time for a series of unknown reasons and favors. He asks to see her bite mark one last time, still perhaps hesitant that she is legitimately immune. Then he devises a plan to travel out to Wyoming to see his brother Tommy. It's kind of like killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Joel's whole reason for taking on this mission was to get a battery to find his brother, but at the same time, Tommy is a former Firefly and may know where the supposed Firefly camp filled with doctors is. Remember that Marlene's plan was to have her squadron of Fireflies pick Ellie up at the Capitol building and take her to this secret camp. While waiting for the battery to charge, Ellie finds this palm tree shirt, which is the same shirt we see her wearing when we're first introduced to her in the game. And while Joel takes a shower, Ellie hides the gun she found in this desk, undoubtedly to play a role later in the season. In the truck, Ellie remarks that it's her first time in one. She doesn't even know how to put on a seatbelt. She remarks that it's like a spaceship, perhaps foreshadowing the birthday present Joel gets her when he takes her to the museum in The Last of Us Part 2. Now there is a tape in this scene here, but it's a spaceship countdown, not like the tape Ellie finds in the glove compartment which states "Mix for Bill," obviously a gift Frank gave Bill, which contains the song they played the first time they met, Linda Ronstadt's Long Long Time. Its lyrics include "Love is full of loss, who knows the cost," as we dolly back to reveal the final shot of that open window Bill said he'd keep open. While this ending is simultaneously beautiful and tragic, the same can't be said for the game's version, which takes a different approach to the tale of Bill and Frank. In the game, Joel and Ellie actually meet with Bill, with Joel even getting caught in one of his traps the first time we meet him. Bill and Frank were partners but went their separate ways.
Once upon a time, I had somebody that I cared about. A partner. Somebody I had to look after. And in this world, that sort of shit's good for one thing: getting you killed.
And it looks like Frank had enough of Bill, wanted to be smuggled into Boston, but was bit along the way. We'll later see him having hung himself rather than turn into one of the infected. Just like Joel received a letter, the game's version has one too, but it's not for Joel, it's for Bill. Consider it Frank's suicide note. It goes on to describe something that couldn't be further than the type of relationship Bill and Frank had in the show. In it, Frank states that he left town because he hated Bill's guts due to him being stuck in his ways. Frank wanted more to life and couldn't get it by staying there with him, so in the end, the risk of getting killed was better than spending one more day with Bill. The Bill segment of the game has this whole sequence which takes place at a runner-infested school. It's there we get our first glimpse of a bloater, something that's already been hinted at in the show.
So there aren't super infected that explode fungus spores on you?
No word yet if this segment has been cut entirely or if we'll see it shifted around to a different episode. We know that this is possible considering the hotel lobby scene from episode 2 doesn't happen until later on in the game. Both versions, however, end relatively the same. Joel and Ellie leave Lincoln with a truck, but in the game version, Ellie knows how to drive one and they drop off Bill near the end of town. His fate in the game universe remains unclear, although you gotta hand it to the guy, he's a great gift giver, handing over a gas siphon to Joel as a parting gift. But now I hand it over to you. What did you think of this week's controversial episode? I want to hear your thoughts and theories in the comments below. Thanks for watching, be sure to like and subscribe, and for more bad takes you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at ThinkStoryYT. Until next time, remember,
I'm not interested in caring about people.